Hello everybody, it's Walter, your favorite historian, educator, professor, and social studies extraordinaire, here today to offer some commentary on what I believe America would be like without the Democratic Party. Alright? So without question, the United States of America would be a very different country without the Democratic Party of the modern era. And as a Democrat, and a very progressive one at that, I shudder to think what this great country would be like without my party to keep Republican excesses at bay. Okay, so here we speculate what America would be like if the Democratic Party of the modern era did not exist, all right, or was so drowned out that it was virtually powerless. And thus the Republican Party would have complete domination over everything without opposition, all right? So first of all, corporate America would likely have even more power and influence over local and national politics than what they already do. Scary thought? Yeah, I think so too. Very few laws would likely exist that limited free market capitalism and its excesses. All right, don't be wrong. I am a capitalist, but it should not exist without restrictions. All right. Insider trading would not likely be prohibited, nor would there be much, if any, oversight over interest rates. All right. Corporations would likely have far more latitude to abuse consumers with usury practices, false advertising, and price gouging at will. These conglomerates would likely be shielded from most liability against consumer lawsuits, not to mention pay even less in federal and state taxes than what they already do. Okay? There would be truly few, if any, laws in place regulating the stock market, nor protecting the American public against corporate abuse or aggressive business practices in general. With that in mind, both corporate money and money from other wealthy donors would flow to politicians in general, as there would likely be very few, if any, laws on the books limiting donation amounts to these candidates running for office. The influence of the wealthy would likely be 100 times greater than what it already is, leaving the average American out to dry on so many levels. Lastly, the wealthy would likely pay even less in federal and state income taxes than what they presently do, further destroying the power of the nation's middle class, all right, which would have to shoulder most, if not all, of the nation's tax burden practically. So next we move on to social protections and civil rights. If Republicans had unfettered power, there would likely be few, if any, laws on the books mandating workplace safety from occupational hazards. No guidelines for time and a half pay, no fair labor standards guidelines. Heck, child labor might even still be legal in a Republican-dominated America. All right? Additionally, labor unions, if they were even allowed to exist, would be mere paper tigers. Let's just keep it real, okay? Severely curtailed in their power against businesses. Minimum wage laws would likely be very limited if they existed at all. Businesses would have unfettered power to terminate people regardless of the reason. Unemployment insurance may exist, but it would not be very plentiful, and it would definitely be very, very limited on the time it could be received. Laws would likely not exist to protect workers from discrimination based on their gender, race, religion, creed, color, sexual orientation, gender identity, disability status, or anything else for that matter. All right. When it comes to civil rights in general, discrimination based on the aforementioned standards would likely be far more tolerated in higher education. All right. Hiring, accommodations, voting, loan applications, licensing, and many other areas of modern life. Okay, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid would likely not exist at all. And if they did, the age to receive and other conditions to receive such benefits would almost certainly be much higher and far more restrictive than what it is today. Okay, similarly, public assistance in the form of food assistance, cash assistance would also be very limited in their allowance, with many more work requirements and hurdles to receive them, not to mention a much shorter time to receive them regardless of one's situation. All right. You don't think that's possible? Give the hard right sector of the GOP a chance. All right. The justice system would also be far harsher in many respects to people of color and the poor, without the protections put in place over the years by Democrats. Book burning would also be common, as we see many Republican politicians are gung-ho about doing today, as well as more censorship over history, which as a historian I find nothing less than deplorable, okay? Any history that is unpleasant and condemning of our great country's not so great past would likely be outlawed. First Amendment notwithstanding. There would also be virtually no laws on the books restricting gun ownership except for groups which they feel would be a personal threat to their power, that is. And that would likely primarily affect people of color more than anyone else, all right? Government spending on various things that we take for granted, including education, infrastructure, public transit, the environment, protection of wildlife, natural disasters, and other things would also be substantially lower, if not non-existent, folks. Now, that takes us to foreign affairs. Republicans would likely take a far more nationalistic approach to dealings with other countries and likely a more aggressive one as well. I'm not making the argument that Republicans naturally gear more towards war than Democrats, as there are many hawks in the Democratic Party as well. But remember, the Democratic Party doesn't exist here. But the Republicans are far less likely to pursue long-term diplomatic measures than the Democrats do, which are more generally inclined to diplomacy than Republicans, all right? Democrats like war too, but will definitely tie that knot in the rope to extend diplomacy more than Republicans. Now, I fully support an America First position, but not to the alienation of our long-standing allies, Great Britain, France, and so forth and so on, and others in NATO, all right? Not to mention, when it comes to the subject of abortion, in a completely Republican America, you would see the practice, if it wasn't completely outlawed, so restricted that it might as well be outlawed in general, taking us back 100 or more years, all right? So, in conclusion, an America without the Democratic Party would likely be a country with far less protections for the less fortunate and less moneyed. It would be an America tilted less towards equity in programs and equality of people, and more towards the haves and the have-nots, okay, far more than what it is today. As long as you have, you'd be good. But if you have not, make it the best way you can. Sadly, that is the mentality of many members of the Republican Party or those who identify as Republicans. And undoubtedly, in a completely Republican America, you would certainly have those who they call rhinos, all right, and much, more moderate Republicans who would also help to, temper some of these excesses that I've mentioned. But you can be assured that they would be a minority, all right, in the overall GOP scheme of governance, and would likely not carry as much influence as they do in our two-party system. So that's my view of what America would be like without the Democratic Party. A scary thought indeed. Let me know if you agree or disagree. I'd love to know your thoughts either way. I love people's commentary regardless of whether or not you're on the same page as I am. So leave them down below. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Take care of yourself. Stay safe out there. I will talk to you at the next video. And don't forget, believe in yourself, dream, try, and do good. Professor Shelton, out.